Hello, welcome to part 2 of our Bryan Basics Guide. Reminder that this is game version 4.2. In this part, we're going to talk more about strategy and go over some basic game plan elements which will build on the essential tools we already went over. We'll also suggest some players to check out and cap it off with a brief character summary. Don't forget about all the resource links I mentioned in part 1. Those may be very useful to you, especially if you are brand new to the game. I've included those once again in the video description below. But enough of that, let's get going. Unlike a lot of other stances in the game, Bryan's are mostly just an extension of his essential moves, and this includes his full crouch while standing stuff, so no stance game per se, just more neutral tools. But we'll start with full crouch while standing. Bryan doesn't have any real tricks or cancels to do full crouch and while standing, so you'll largely be working these moves from a raw duck or after doing something that puts you in full crouch like down back 3. The exception being the built-in crouch dash moves, which we'll get to later. First, you have while standing 4, your generic mid I11 check. His while standing 3-4 is a powerful I12 mid-mid combo. If while standing 3 hits counter hit, you get a juggle regardless whether you decide to finish the string, which is nice. It's also another string you can delay, and the second hit hits really hard by itself, so the delay helps you nab some damage there too. While standing 3 and while standing 3-4 are both -10, which really isn't that bad for the potential reward. His while standing 1 is an I15 launcher, but pretty annoying though because it's -15 yet has really good pushback, so it goes unpunished a lot more than it should. Full crouch down forward 4 is a really nasty high crushing counter hit launcher, again only -10, so you'll see Bryan's use this in setups a lot. Full crouch down forward 2-1 is most useful as a 13 frame punisher, however the first hit is a safe poke if you want, and if they don't know to duck the second hit, this becomes really powerful in the neutral as a safe knockdown splatter. Finally, while standing 2 exists, but is mostly there for flash. It's an I19 mid that has a follow-up slam juggle option. Although the juggle does good damage and while standing 2 is only -10, it's much slower than his other options, so you really have to have your opponent a bit confused already to make good use of it, but it's there if you want it. Now the actual stances. His sway is done with quarter circle back and has a little bit of evasion, but don't expect to be using it as a consistent evasive tool. There are only 3 moves, all of which are really good. Sway 3 is an I19 power low, -13 on block, but big +5 on hit and a mini combo on counter hit. This is actually your main low threat period, not just from sway, so be really active with it. Sway 4 is a traditional mid launcher, so -12 on block, fairly fast at I17. Sway 2-4 is a safe mid high. It doesn't jail, so the high can be ducked, however you can confirm it and it gives you a knockdown for a free Sway 4 follow-up. Counter hit Sway 2-4 is also a launcher, so you can use the delay to try to nab a counter hit, which is a theme among his strings. Both hits also have really good range, which helps it even more. His crouch dash on the other hand is mostly for utility since he has no low from it. Crouch dash 1 and crouch dash 3-4 are merely your while standing 1 and while standing 3-4 respectively. Crouch dash 1+2 is a really scary wall bouncer, nice range, only -12, which again isn't bad for the reward. Crouch dash 2-1 is a high mid power combo. It's normally reserved for juggles, but it still hits really hard and can carry to the wall for big damage. Crouch dash 2 is safe, whereas crouch dash 2-1 is only -11. Finally, crouch dash 4 is a string that begins with a safe mid and has a few different paths. Still mostly there for some string pressure, which we'll discuss in the next section. You'll notice that his crouch dash is mostly filled with power moves, so unlike traditional crouch dashes, it's not there for raw mix-up potential or even poking per se. If you do a crouch dash input, you're locked into those options for a moment. Still, his crouch dash moves are powerful and you definitely should use them, and you still get the evasive ducking at the start of the crouch dash like you would with any other. Also note that some strings allow you to transition to crouch dash like back 3 forward, which we'll go over a little bit more in the next section. So again, Bryan's stances and full crouch while standing moves are more or less neutral moves that you should use in the same manner as any of your essential moves, especially stuff like Sway 3. I'll say up front that Bryan is a character that takes some getting used to play properly. There are a few reasons for this. First, he wants to play heavy keepout since his counter hits are so godly. 1-2-1, magic 4, 3+4, forward 4, full crouch down forward 4, back 1, forward 3, and while standing 3, among others. And those are just the legit launchers. Things like down 2-3, which is a natural combo on counter hit, can yield really high reward as well. He even has a punch parry. Although you have traditional counter hit setups like frame traps and such, these are largely used to keep your opponent on defense so that you can dictate the pace of the match. His low pokes are really good at helping with this too. We mentioned down back 3 and down 4, but down 3+4 and down 3 are really good as well. And things like jet upper and orbital serve this same keep out purpose without being strictly counter hit tools. But the broader point is that these moves can only be as effective as your ability to anticipate your opponent's aggression, which requires experience and leads me to my second point. Other than his jab and Magic 4, Bryan lacks a lot of traditional tools, so you have to play somewhat unorthodox and at times risky to get your work done. For example, he has no hop kick or generic down forward 2, instead having to rely on a mix of orbital, jet upper, forward 4-1, and sway 4. These are all good tools, but they're either on the slow side or clunky to use. He doesn't have the generic toe kick from standing, and his down forward doesn't high crush. He doesn't have a generic down forward 1, instead down forward 2 is his safe I-13 poke, but it's much worse on block at -6, so he has to rely on string enders to gain back initiative. In general, this is a Bryan theme. Although he has a ton of safe tools on block, they are either negative enough that he loses his turn, or he has to opt for a string ender for cover, which is almost always going to be a safe but duckable high or an unsafe mid. So you can't play too carelessly, otherwise you're going to get mauled. That being said, really lean on Bryan's superior range. His mid range is second to none, so dial up the spacing and make your opponent work for every inch. Now once they do slow down, you have a couple of options to work your offense. One is to work the string game. Bryan benefits from having a lot of strings that yield big reward beyond the first hit. Some we've mentioned, like down forward 2-3 or down 2-3, but it's very much worth it to see how your opponent reacts to your string options from standing 3, back 2, back 3, and even more uncommon strings like crouch dash 4. These things are not risk-free, however, if properly mixed up, Bryan can be really hard to read. For instance, 3-2-1, although being -9, is still a safe mid-mid-mid with a canned mid-low mix-up at the end. Back 3-2-1 is similar to that, just with a high for the second hit, but back 3-4 and back 3-1+2 are mid checks for duckers. Or you can go to crouch dash with back 3 forward. Back 2-1 and crouch dash 4-1 can both cancel to a sidestep in addition to the normal string enders, and then of course you have a huge array of 2-hit strings that end with ridiculously powerful hits, most of which we've already mentioned. Finishing some strings now and then is going to be crucial to running a proper neutral game. For example, in order for down forward 2 to be of any use, they really need to fear down forward 2-3. But another offensive option is to abuse sway 3 and start working the mix-up game. Just remember that sway 3 is -13 on block, and because it requires the sway on top of being I-19, opponents will have an easier time parrying it than normal, quicker neutral tools. You can try to grind your opponent down with the low pokes, but sway 3 is your only really powerful low threat, and without a grab game, you gotta use it. Otherwise, your opponent really has no reason to duck against you. Regardless, it's nothing complex, just use sway 3 and mix in your normal mids. Lastly, you can use his taunt game. Truth be told, this is the element of Bryan's game that elevates him in tier lists, and it's fairly simple, but it's very execution heavy. The taunt itself is done with 1+3+4. It does no damage, but it's a mid guard break that on impact gives him a 16 frame window to land an attack. In the open, the magic is taunt into forward back 2. At the wall, he can do that, but he can also do back 4, which is a perfect 16 frames and gives a free forward back 2 on hit, so massive damage. So if your opponent tech rolls, stands, or does a get up attack on Oki, the taunt will win. If they sit there, he can bail early on the taunt and do a grounded hit. Overall, it's very nasty and not much that they can do about it. The difficulty for you is being able to do this taunt cancel. I wish I had some tips or tricks for you, but the fact is that it's just really hard and takes significant commitment to practicing to get it consistent enough to apply in a real match. That being said, until you get to the point where you can land back 4 or jet upper, anything faster will be significantly easier, like 2-3 or 4-3, so you can at least still implement the foundational setup element of the taunt while you work on getting the hard stuff down. And that's it. Play the keep out game, mix in your strings, chop at them ankles with sway 3, and work on your taunt setups, and you'll be a Bryan pro in no time. As always, we'll start by recommending Applay. It's the best quick info resource out there. Once you start to get comfortable with Tekken and you want to pick up a character on the fly, there's nothing better than this. So I'm just going to give you one player for this guy, jimmyj Tran, aka Mr. Naps. Yeah, I could show you Nee or Bilal or whoever, but really, Jimmy has been the best and most loyal Bryan player since forever. His executional skill is second to none, so just watch this guy. The difficulty you'll run into is that he doesn't stream, nor does he have a YouTube or anything to my knowledge. The good news is that Bryan's general playstyle hasn't changed in a while, and Jimmy always makes it deep into tournaments, so there's plenty of tryhard sets for him out there to watch. But as I just mentioned, don't take this list as final. There are plenty of high-level players that have pulled out Bryan in tournaments, such as the aforementioned Nee, so just search around and you'll find plenty more. This brings us to the end of our guide. Bryan is an amazing mid-range character with numerous heavy-hitting moves, particularly mids, along with incredibly scary counter hit and crush tools. Overall, he has one of the best keep-out kits in the game. So getting in on Bryan is very tough, and when he hits, he has an absolutely absurd Oki game centered around his taunt, particularly at the wall. That being said, most of his best moves are on the slower side, and he has a number of unorthodox tools that often require him to take some risk to get things going. Also, given the executional requirement to really unlock his potential, there are absolutely holes in his game that can be taken advantage of. But if you love that executional skill element, you're going to love Bryan. So keep at it, and I wish you the best of luck in your training. And with that, thanks for checking out this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications here on YouTube so that you get alerted when a new video drops. Twitch and Twitter links are also down below. Lastly, huge thank you to our patrons. The more support we have, the more resources we can devote to channel content. So again, I can't thank everyone enough for considering supporting the Patreon. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.